Have you ever woken up from a dream, and with each passing second, the dream starts to make less sense? The logic of the real world quickly takes over, and the dream logic that just made perfect sense a minute ago starts to pull away, to go back deep into the subconscious. Dreams, and more specifically nightmares, have always fascinated me, and how in this dream realm there is a completely different set of feelings and experiences. But in this video, I want to talk about nightmares and share some media that managed to depict that bizarre but fascinating dream logic that only presents itself in our sleep. You can expect spoilers, and we will start off with movies. And who else could I start this video off with than, of course, David Lynch. He is the absolute master of capturing dream logic on film, so I picked out some segments from his works that, in my opinion, depict nightmares perfectly. The first movie I want to mention is Mulholland Drive. The whole thing feels like a dream, but there is one scene in specific that does a great job at depicting a nightmare. It starts off with two friends in a diner, and from the very first moment, one of them is acting off.
I just wanted to come here.
To Winkies?
This Winkies.
He says he wanted to meet at this diner because he had a dream that took place here. The other guy was in it too, and both of them were terrified in it. In the dream, the other guy was standing by the counter. Then come some very ominous lines.
There's a man in back of this place. He's the one who's doing it. I can see him through the wall.
The other guy gets up to pay, and what do you know? He's standing exactly as he was in the dream, and he's looking very terrified. The first guy starts to realize that the dream is happening again, or reality is happening just as the dream was. Maybe that would be the scariest scenario, those illogical dream feelings transferred over to our waking hours. Another very important thing is that the guy says it's not day or night.
It's not day or night. It's kind of half night, you know?
This is something I always thought was present in dreams, and later I will go more into this. They exit the diner and start going to the back. And as they are going, the guy with the dream starts looking around and taking note of the environment. And I got the vibe that he's seeing everything he was in the dream. And this setting is so ordinary and a classic American environment, yet the vibes are extremely off-putting. The music helps with that too. So they go to the back where the man was in the dream. The music gets real tense, and ultimately they reach the back and the man comes out and jump scares them. The guy who had the dream collapses. He probably felt that dream fear, which is 10 times scarier than any lucid fear. During the speech, there is one line in particular that's super off-putting. He's the one who's doing it. It is so ambiguous and menacing, like the man in the back of the place is giving him this feeling, or maybe he's the reason he had the dream, or maybe something else entirely. It's the perfect amount of nonsense somebody says confidently that you would expect in a nightmare. And in Lynch's movies, these strangely ominous one-liners are present all throughout. Like this one in Lost Highway, when the guy says he's in two places at once.
As a matter of fact, I'm there right now.
I have always loved these scenes, and how ridiculously ominous the statements the characters are making are. Then there is of course Twin Peaks, with its iconic Black Lodge/Red Room dream sequence. Everything is so off that it makes even the curtains look ominous. The room itself loops, and there is so little furniture and decoration that everything looks like it was placed deliberately and has a purpose. And the worst part is that if you actually find yourself here, it's going to take quite a bit of work and time to get out. And one of the missing pieces segments, we see a character come to this realization that these curtains are going to be his new home. And he is essentially trapped in a nightmare he had previously. Besides this being a scary environment to find yourself in the Twin Peaks universe, dreams are law. When Agent Cooper has a dream, nobody doubts him when he uses it to solve another mystery. He takes ambiguous lines that characters in his dreams tell him, like,
"Without chemicals, he points."
and he just rolls with it as if it came from somebody in real life. And it works every time. Then there is Ronette's Vision/Nightmare, which shows an event that really happened, but it plays out just like a nightmare would, with its fragmented imagery, so I think it's worth mentioning. It starts off with a zoom in on a train cart. It is super dark, and there is a man screaming and howling like a wolf as fire goes off on the side. A girl in complete agony is screaming right at the camera. The man is bashing into something under him, just off screen. Pure nightmare fuel. Now, Inland Empire is a bit of a heavy watch, and not praised as much as Lynch's other works. However, this one spawned the most nightmares for me personally. When you watch this movie, especially for the first time, it makes little to no sense. The best way I can describe it is that if you could somehow port this movie to your brain during your sleep, I'm sure it would fit right in, more than anything I mentioned so far. The main story, from what I understand, is that the main character loses herself in the character she's playing, not knowing what's real or script anymore. And the movie she's acting in is based on a Polish folk tale and is said to be cursed. There are so many dark rooms and hallways and illogical passageways, some leading into slightly weird characters and then others leading into rooms of humanoid rabbits that can morph into humans. Then there are just scenes where slightly weird stuff is happening, but it manages to feel exactly like a dream, like this scene in the yard.
Where's the paper towels?
Part of the movie also takes place in Poland, and there are these scenes of nighttime snowy streets, and the lighting is slightly red, and this really reminded me of some dreams I had that I even forgot I had. Another great thing about this movie is that it was shot with a Sony PD-150, which isn't really too fancy when making movies, and the bad quality really works well for depicting dreams, which is why it's often used as a filter in those backrooms games. I actually got a really cheap old camera myself recently for this dream effect purpose, and I really like how the pictures came out. In most cases, nightmares are only nightmares, they don't bleed into real life. However, in A Nightmare on Elm Street, the barrier between dreams and reality disappears completely. This movie is in my top 10 of all time, and Freddy is my favorite of the slasher characters because he's like the physical embodiment of a nightmare. He shapes the environment around you and lets people collapse to his will inside it. He violates you in your most vulnerable state, when your guard is at its complete low, in your sleep. Once you enter his realm, there really isn't any limits to what he can conjure. And it's scary because if you die in the dream, you die in real life, and any wounds are also transferred over. The characters know these rules. They try to stay awake for days, but they always lose. There's no way around it. You're bound to do some daydreaming here and there, opening a crack big enough through which Freddy can step in. And usually when you watch a slasher, you think, oh, I can outrun Michael Myers or just shoot him. Not Freddy though, because when you meet him, you're playing on his court. The dreams start off normal. You're in your house, maybe school, everything seems fine. Then something shifts. The hallway is longer than it was last time I checked, or a staircase turns soft under your feet. The characters don't notice right away because the movie doesn't announce the transition, it's seamless. It just happens, like it does in real dreams when they shift into nightmares. And before you know it, you're in his boiler room. I didn't like the sequels as much as the original, but they had some insane nightmare sequences. In the first movie, they are mostly subtle, like the walls are bending or you get sucked into your bed. Even when you enter the dream realm, he doesn't go that crazy with the transformations. His arms extend or he has worms inside him. But in the second movie, Freddy's Revenge, there's a school bus falling into a lava pit and being struck by lightning. Earlier I mentioned that line from Mulholland Drive, where it wasn't quite day or night, but still bright outside. Maybe this happens because our unconscious mind tries to combine all the times of day for some reason. But I think that this lighting effect is very important for dreams, and it's present in two more movies that I would like to mention. The first one being the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. While not technically a dream, the characters in this movie enter an enigmatic portal to their imagination. But there is a good chance they will meet the devil there. So I guess it's the same thing as a nightmare. I watched this movie when I was a lot younger, and I don't know if it resulted in nightmares I had, or if it just depicted the ones I had accurately. But there are all sorts of wacky worlds here. Sunny meadows, mystical forests, serene rivers, and things of that nature. But all of these dreamy settings are one step away from nightmares, and the movie goes that route more than once. This shot in particular quite literally shows the fragile bridge between dreams and nightmares, a sunny desert on one side and the motel of despair on the other. And the land of nightmares here seems coherent and tied together, like every location is part of the same map. The evil motel, bar, mountain, village, it's like they're all connected. I always experience this myself, where my dreams and nightmares form a sort of map. They're all different locations in the realm of the subconscious. Lovecraft also wrote about this, and I will go more into that later in the video. Another example appears in the movie Altered States, where the main character uses a sensory deprivation tank to explore the deepest layers of his mind. Naturally, what he discovers isn't enlightenment like he expected, but complete horror. There are dreamlike, more so fever dreamlike scenes with that lighting effect again, dark skies but well-lit subjects. But also there are all kinds of other things, and in this movie you don't spend too much time in the dream world. They are more like flashes of ideas and concepts all over the place. But it captures that fast-paced, changing nightmare environment perfectly, maybe more so than any other movie I mentioned so far. Later in the movie, the nightmares really get to the main character, and he even turns into an ape. Now, let's talk about some art pieces, and we'll start with dreams, then progress to nightmares. Of course, I am no art critic, and I don't really know what I'm talking about. Just sharing the thoughts I had when observing these captivating works. René Magritte's paintings, in my opinion, depict those dreams that have a good chance of turning into nightmares and still leave you a little shaken after waking up, even if they just stay as they are. It's like the logic of a dream before it becomes a nightmare. The moment you notice something is off, but you can't tell what. The sky is fine, the walls are clean. There's a man in a suit, but why can't you ever see his face? What is he hiding? And actually, that apple is a little too big. The paintings are calm, and there isn't too much going on, but they still manage to look strange. Nightmares don't always announce themselves with monsters. The moment something repeats itself with just a small difference, we start to doubt everything, especially when dreaming. This is true for many horror stories and nightmare logic. When something is slightly off, that it's worth noting, and the possibility of something sinister being at play makes it unsettling. And maybe that lighting thing I mentioned earlier works in both ways, like this painting of his where the sky is bright but the environment is dark, and even needs a lamp to be visible. There are paintings of trains coming out of the wall, a man's mirror reflection of the wrong side, and the iconic Golconda of countless men suspended in the air. These don't make much sense, but why should they? There are no rules here. Now, Salvador Dali's paintings feel like the moment you realize a dream is turning into a nightmare, when logic is bending and the horrors are beginning to spawn in. His works feature melting clocks, tigers leaping out of fish, and even anthropomorphic bread. His most recognizable work is probably The Persistence of Memory, in which there are clocks melting over a barren, silent landscape. Maybe this is showing that time is passing, but not traditionally ticking, more so rotting. Maybe this is a place beyond time, where clocks are obsolete and begin to decay. There is a thing resembling a human here at the bottom, and in another painting, this biology goes even further, with these humanoid things now melting over trees and a horse shooting out from a cannon. Many of the paintings feature vast empty spaces, And much like that room in Twin Peaks, when something is so barren, it makes everything that is actually there feel especially deliberate and impactful. Dali had the idea that dreams had their own internal logic. And this ties to what I said in the intro to this video. Dreams have their own set of rules and emotions that they evoke in us. This is why looking at paintings like these remind us of those feelings from the dreamland. Now, if we keep progressing in the severity of the unsettling factor in dreams, the last stop will be Beksinski. While Dali's and Magritte's paintings are unsettling, they are more so dreams that feel off-putting. And Beksinski's paintings are outright nightmares. He himself once said, "I wish to paint in such a manner as if I were photographing dreams." His works weren't titled or given explanations and meanings, just visual depictions of his nightmares. There are familiar things here, like humanoid creatures, horses, wolves, even crosses, and graveyards. But they are placed somewhere so dark and gloomy that they just radiate hopelessness and despair. Everything is crumbling and nothing is alive, but nothing is truly dead either. Despite him not naming everything, you get the sense that it's all part of one world. The creatures all look kind of similar, like they're all part of the same ecosystem but evolved slightly differently. Another thing about these environments is how quiet it all is. I feel like if I found myself here, all I would hear would be an ominous humming from the distance. And in every frame, there's a sense that something just happened here. Maybe a ritual or a sacrifice, and you're only seeing the aftermath. So as with nearly every other one of my videos, we've now reached a point where I will talk about H.P. Lovecraft. Not only was he inspired by his own nightmares for a lot of his stories, he even had a set of stories called the Dream Cycle, which take place in the Dreamlands, an area only accessible to the most imaginative in their sleep. The story I picked out for today is called What the Moon Brings. It's very short and it's part of the Dream Cycle, and I think it shows a very cool depiction of a nightmare with Lovecraft's flair to it. The story begins with the narrator in a garden that is lit by moonlight. There is foliage and trees nearby, and there's even a shallow stream. But this is Lovecraft, so of course the stream starts acting weird. The narrator sees unwanted ripples tipped with yellow light, as if those placid waters were drawn on in resistless currents to strange oceans that are not in the world. So he follows the stream and he notices that there are lotus flowers on the banks, and the flowers are falling into the stream. And as they are swimming away, they are looking back at him with dead faces. He keeps following the stream and he realizes that the garden no longer has any walls like it used to. Instead, it's just endless paths and trees and bushes. The stream widens into a river, and all of a sudden the narrator is in a marshy/sandy beach area with a vast unnamed ocean in front of him. There are waves coming and they bring this weird smell that isn't too pleasant, and the faces are disappearing from the lotus flowers once they reach the ocean. The moon goes westward and the ocean starts decreasing and revealing white columns filled with seaweed. And eventually he sees spires, the towers, and the roofs of that dead, dripping city. It turns out that everybody who dies gets transported to this sort of afterlife by the lotus flowers, and the narrator found himself here for, once again, who knows what reason. And then there are worms that eat the dead. In this unplaced and forgotten spot had all the flesh of the churchyards gathered for puffy sea worms to gnaw and glut upon. All of a sudden, there is a condor descending from the skies and he lands on a faraway reef. The narrator says that he thought to ask the condor if he could see anyone that he knew that was alive and died, but the condor is too far away so he can't talk to him. The smell that the waves bring becomes stronger, and suddenly the narrator becomes aware of a new type of horror before he even lays his eyes on it. For when I raised my eyes, I saw that the waters had ebbed very low, showing much of the vast reef whose rim I had seen before. And then I saw that this reef was but the black basalt crown of a shocking Acon, whose monstrous forehead now shone in the dim moonlight, and whose vile hooves must paw the hellish ooze miles below. Naturally, he goes insane. He starts screaming, and he gladly plunges himself into the worms eating the dead than to even look at this horrible emerging statue. This is a very cool story, and sort of reminded me of Dagon, if you're familiar with that one. However, in Dagon, the most unnatural thing that happens is that the monster emerges from the water. In this story, everything has that nightmare unnatural flavor to it, from the setting to the logic of the narrator. The setting starts changing and morphing at the very beginning of the story. First, the walls disappeared, then the garden itself disappeared, and he was in the marshy/sandy beach area. Then he has this illogical thought of speaking to a bird when the condor comes, which is impossible unless you live in Twin Peaks. This is a quick story, but a pretty cool depiction of a nightmare by Lovecraft. And apparently this is based on a real nightmare he had, which is very cool.